This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Welcome to BRD. I'm Mark Garrigus. Here's GPS.
Good to be with you, Mark.
We have our matching bubblies. We should ask them to pay for the product placement, but Absolutely. That's a different discussion. Speaking of product placement, how do you like this segue?
It's pretty good.
The kerfuffle on the Supreme Court is going to lead today's show. Why don't you get into it, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. So some may have seen an NPR report yesterday where a guy wrote a story. It was very lengthy, covering, a lot of his opinions on the structure of the court and how it's changed over the years. But the thing that got headlines and the thing that everyone else re-reported was sort of a minor thing at the beginning of the article where he's claimed that Chief Justice Roberts asked all of the justices when they came back from Omicron to wear a mask while they were on the bench in protection of Justice Sotomayor, who is diabetic and thus at risk if she comes down with COVID. According to the reports, every justice agreed except for Justice Neil Gorsuch, who happens to sit next to Sotomayor. So that story,
and who apparently was not wearing a mask at the last argument, and she remotely
she went into her chambers,
zoomed in,
So what we're
seeing
here is a tweet from the author that this was after Justice Gorsuch and Justice Sotomayor released a joint statement denying the story and saying that none of that ever happened and that there's no animosity over mask wearing or any of this. And this is the author doubling down.
And boy, does he double down. Mind you, there is a joint statement by two Supreme Court justices who you could say are, to some degree, the leaders of each of their respective wings on the court. Gorsuch for his gang of three, Sotomayor for her gang of three. They released a statement categorically saying it was false. This NPR, and mind you, his story went viral immediately, and people were completely taking Gorsuch apart. By the way, this is the second time in a month that Gorsuch has been excoriated, at least he would say unfairly. The first time was a transcript of an argument during the COVID hearings where it was taken that he had said 100 or thousands, and then that was released as 100,000, which ended up not being true. And then they fact-checked Sotomayor, who had indicated 100,000 children were hospitalized, many on ventilators. That was fact-checked as untrue. Well, now the two of them came together and said this story wasn't true. And the reporter just comes back and basically says, he calling out the journalist as well, saying, at best false without any context whatsoever. So at best false means they're liars, right? Is there any other way to take that?
At best false. Yeah, that's absolutely calling two Supreme Court justices bold-faced liars.
Wow, exactly. One on the left, one on the right. So no matter which side of the aisle you're on, here's the reporter saying, I wasn't engaging in fake news. They're liars. We've really reached kind of a point in American jurisprudence, or maybe American politics, where it is just stunning to me that the Fourth Estate is now blatantly saying that when two Supreme Court justices come out and say one thing, that it's at best false. And then he doubles down also on the reporters.
That's what I'm saying.
Are now walking it back.
Right. That's the part that's almost craziest to me. I mean, I can almost step back and say, if you want to say that my reporting was true, then you have to call these two liars because they just came out with this statement. So what choice do you have? But to then start turning around and going after all of your colleagues and calling them terrible. What are we doing here, pal? Everyone's going to hate you.
Yeah, dude. Why don't you come on? Tomorrow's the big show, or yes. Saturday's the big show. Come on in. I'd like to talk to you about it because it really is a kind of a stunning. And what are you basing this on? We've got a statement by two people who are the people involved in your story.
Right.
And they're saying this is categorically untrue. you don't have a direct quote from either one of them. So it's not like you're saying they said this, I've got it on tape. You got it from somebody else. And who is this somebody else? Why isn't the somebody else the liar? Why is it that the first person or the first people or the two justices that are liars and not the person who told you this?
Yeah, this anonymous
By
source.
the way, if you're reporting for NPR on the Supreme Court about jurisprudence, you should learn a little bit first about hearsay. So, and the reliability of hearsay, and who is it you're quoting? Let's have a discussion about who it is, what they said, what the context was before you just start calling everybody a liar.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And look, it's a sincere invite. David Gura from NPR, if you would like to come on Reasonable Doubt, it's not very hard to get in touch with us on Twitter or on regular social media. So reach out.
Tweet at us. I'd love to hear it. I mean, I'll give you whatever form you want. I think Adam would love to hear it.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's a left versus right issue. I think it's a jurisprudence issue. You know, you're basically calling out two Supreme Court justices on what basis? I'd like to know why it is you say that what they say does not mean what they say.
Yeah, and I would, I would like to hear in a conversation where someone can question you outside of Twitter, why your confidence level is so high that you feel you can do this. I mean, is it strictly because you're sitting behind a keyboard and it's not an interactive situation? I would be interested to hear from you.
Well, and then the other one that kind of piqued my interest, you hear a lot in Los Angeles about the situation in Venice Beach. And for those of you who don't know, just Google it, Venice homeless, and see what's going on down there. And it's, I think by all accounts, most people would say atrocious. I've talked, by the way, and I'm not just saying the homeowners who I've had extended conversations with. I've also had extended conversations with homeless activists who are down there as well. I think the one thing everybody can agree on is that it's an untenable situation, and it's gotten out of control no matter what side of the homeless fence you happen to be on. But interestingly, there was a recall effort. And I targeted Mike Bonin, I believe is his name, who's the council member for Venice.
Correct.
And the recall movement or people had claimed back in November that they had 39,000 signatures. I believe that exceeded what they needed by 12,000. So they thought they had a sufficient cushion. It was announced today there's going to be no recall, that they invalidated fully more than a third of the signatures. And so I guess for those of you down in Venice, this is the guy. This is your champion, Mike Bonin. You elected him. You got him. You get the bone. There's no other way to look at it other than an endorsement of his policies, right? Yeah,
I mean, it's one of these you bought the ticket, take the ride situations. But yes, you're right. They invalidated almost 14,000 votes or signatures rather, and came up 1,350 short. So he's in. He's in.
It's a stunning reversal. It's a win for Bonin. I think you're not going to find a whole lot of people in Venice who are happy with it, but then again, it's democracy in action. And by the way, also there were, I want to say, 2 or 3 other Culver City, whether it was the mayor and the city council, also did not get on recall. So maybe the pendulum is swinging here in terms of recalls in California, both municipal and statewide.
Yeah, maybe. You and I didn't cover this beforehand, but I think we'd be remiss to not just at least touch on the other tragic story coming out of LA this week, the young UCLA student who was working at an upscale furniture store, and somebody came in and seemingly in a random act of violence ended up stabbing and killing her. And it's just it's a real tragedy. They've luckily caught and arrested that gentleman, so he is off the streets for now. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't even know why I brought that up. It's just such a bummer.
Well, because it's part of the problem is we repeat it ad nauseum, and I know that there's a lot of people who don't like to hear it, but we have a severe situation with the mentally ill, self-medicating and otherwise, and they're on the streets and they're not getting what they need. And we have there's a contingent of people who want to kind of cast this more as a housing situation as opposed to what I think most people who see what's happening, if you actually are in one of these neighborhoods that's under siege, which is that it's a mental health crisis and it's awful. And I just, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. I know that at least in the city of LA, it has become the major issue in the mayoral contest. Our past mayor, Eric Garcetti, after doing his stint here in LA, has now been confirmed as the ambassador to India, so he can take some of his practice of creating Calcutta to actually there to kind of see whether he was able to accurately replicate it. And all of a sudden, it has become an issue at the forefront. It's interesting to hear the debate, because there are people who are now recognizing that this is not all a housing issue, and that this is not all, and that there are people who do not want to be off the street, so to speak. And there's been some interesting first-person narratives about that as well, and maybe we'll get into that on the next episode.
Absolutely. Well, yes, I agree with you, Mark. It is just a bummer. It's good to hear that it's finally getting some political action and that there will be at least some debate and hopefully some movement. But yeah, I mean, it's just, for those who don't live in LA, I'm a lifelong Angelino. My wife and son don't go to LA anymore, at least.
Well, I will tell you, so I was one of the few people of my age born in Los Angeles, literally in downtown Los Angeles, went to law school in downtown Los Angeles, and have practiced my entire career in downtown Los Angeles. And what has happened is an abomination. And as somebody who's a lifelong Democrat, I will tell you that it's about time that the party, and obviously we control the state and virtually all of the municipalities, absent, the pockets of where you live,
Orange
behind the orange curtain. But it's funny or ironic or maybe a relief. Finally, the Democratic Party has recognized the fact that this is a losing hand, so to speak. This is not, in the sense that you can't expect businesses or people to live in these areas, whether it's with, the encampments just break your heart, because
they do.
It harkens back 40 years ago to places in third world countries that I won't name, where you would see it and you'd say, I'm uncomfortable even being in this country because of the poverty and everything else. But now we've got not just encampments, we have people who are a danger to themselves and others who, are in the throes of mental health crisis, and we don't do anything about it. In fact, we kind of miscast and change the narrative, and it's about time that somebody started to recognize that.
Well, certainly it's being talked about a lot in this building. Between you and Drew, I feel like I've talked about this for about 2 hours today. So I'm happy to do it.
It's so frustrating, but it is what it is.
It's devastating, but hopefully there's brighter days ahead. But with that said, Mark, thank you for the time as always. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the best hour in the universe. But until then, we'll call it on Beyond.
Okay. Thanks, Gary.
Bye.
GPS. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.